He's that guy, you know. He's that guy in the show. That guy in the show.
Thank you so much for reminding me, Professor. Well, we've got a good one for you today, ladies and gentlemen, because this week's That Guy is actually that gal. And the gal that was in that show was suggested by Don. And today, we're going to look at the talented and varied career of Yvonne De Carlo. Professor, can you please enlighten myself about the long, varied, wonderful, talented Yvonne De Carlo, please?
You betcha. So Yvonne De Carlo was born Margaret Yvonne Middleton on September 1st, 1922 in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. She was named after the movie star Baby Peggy. I guess she was a Margaret, so she was called Peggy by her family when she was young. And her mother was French, and her father was from New Zealand. Her mom was kind of wild, and she didn't really remember much about her father, and he was out of the picture by the time Yvonne was 3. The family moved around Vancouver, very poor. They did have family there, so that was helpful. She wanted to be a writer, Yvonne, and she won $5 in a poetry contest, and she wrote plays for the neighborhood kids. And she also learned to sing in a choir, and she learned to dance, and her mom would take her to L.A. to try to get into show business. In 1940, she did well in a bunch of beauty contests and got an agent to get her an audition for a Hollywood chorus line. But Yvonne and her mother turned down the spot because before they would hire her, they wanted to see her, quote, upper assets, unquote. And they were like, nope. She was eventually able to get work in a chorus line in the Florentine Gardens, which is a club in L.A., but eventually she was able to move up the rank. You know, she was in the back of the chorus line, and she was able to start moving up, but then got arrested by immigration and sent back to Canada. She got sponsored and was able to return and was able to she did a lot of dancing and got great notices. She got into movies in 1941 with a movie called Harvard, Here I Come. She was uncredited. She was a bathing beauty, had one line, and got $20 and her SAG card. So there she goes. She was in This Gun for Hire in 1942. She was in The Road to Morocco, Youth on Parade, For Whom the Bell Tolls, where she got a scene with Gary Cooper. The Story of Dr. Wassel, a Cecil B. DeMille movie. Kismet, Here Come the Waves. Salome, Where She Danced. This was 1945 and was her big break. So she got some much better movies going forward. She was in Frontier Gal, Song of Scheherazade, Slave Girl, Brute Force, Black Bart, River Lady, Casbah. Criss Cross, which was in 1949 and was Tony Curtis's debut. Calamity Jane and Sam Bass, The Gal Who Took the West, The Desert Hawk, Tomahawk, Hotel Sahara, and Silver City. She was in Scarlet Angel, Sombrero, The San Francisco Story, Lights Out, Sea Devils, Fort Algiers, The Captain's Paradise, Happily Ever After, The Contessa's Secret, Shotgun. Now, one thing that people might remember her for was she was in the 10 Commandments, where she played the wife of Moses and got good reviews. She was in The Buccaneer, The Baker's Wife, Death of a Scoundrel, Sword and the Cross, McClintock, A Global Affair, The Mark of Zorro, and Satan's Cheerleaders. TV, she was in Bonanza, Adventures in Paradise, Death Valley Days, Follow the Sun, Burke's Law, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., Fantasy Island, Tales from the Crypt, Dream On, Murder, She Wrote, The Mark of Zorro, The Virginian, and The Greatest Show on Earth. Now, you know, her husband was a stuntman, and he became permanently disabled when he was working on the movie How the West Was Won. He lost his leg, ultimately. She was desperate for a steady job, and she got one. Boy, did she get one. She played Lily Munster on the Munsters and was fantastic. She played that kind of a very traditional housewife role in the movies, except for she was a vampire and her husband was a Frankenstein monster, and it made it hysterical. She very much in the, the theme of, the Fred Flintstone and Wilma, and also Jackie Gleason and Alice. She played the same kind of wife, except in a monster theme, and it was brilliant, and she was so good in it. And I've seen some interviews where they had some of the other guys, Fred Gwynn and Grandpa, and they would be talking, and they were friends. They were in Car 54, Where Are You? And we're like, Yvonne De Carlo, she's a movie star. What the heck is she going to do? Why is she coming to our little comedy? And they were so used, they had a great little team, and they were used to comedy, and they were like, I don't know about this. I don't know if she's going to be any good. And she blew them away. Her comedy, or her comedic timing was excellent. She was just perfect for that role. And it's hard to imagine the Munsters without her. Chris, what are some of your memories of Yvonne De Carlo?
Thanks, Prof. Well, like you, it's obviously the Munsters. This is the first thing that came to mind. I would catch it in reruns sporadically because it wasn't rerun where I was growing up. I had to catch it, when I was out of town visiting relatives. But the first thing I saw her in, believe it or not, though, when I was growing up, during those afternoon movies that you see that were a thing back then, they showed Munster Go Home. And it was in color. And how cool was it to see the Munsters depicted in color? This was such a treat to see that as a little kid, and it kind of wanted me to crave to see more of the reruns of that particular sitcom as a kid. Really, really enjoyed it. And that was sort of that broad-based humor that really appealed to me. One of the things, though, in prepping for this, with little prep I do, was finding out, though, that there was a period back in the late 70s, early 80s, to a point where they would sort of revive TV shows and then make them like a TV movie, because they did have like a Munsters reunion movie in the early 80s. They sort of did that with a few shows like the Wild Wild West. I think there was a Man from U.N.C.L.E. one, the Gilligan's Island, of course. It seemed like, there was a period of a window where it was like, oh yeah, we got to revive and, do reunion shows with respect to that. So I totally forgot there was a Munster reunion. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. Yeah, how cool is that to see, a Munsters reunion? So good for them. Yeah. Prof, you briefly mentioned A Girl from U.N.C.L.E., and I thought, wow, I forgot about that show too. And how cool would that be to rerun? Because along with The Man from U.N.C.L.E., that was a companion piece to the show. It was a spinoff where you had Stephanie Powers. And I think this was like the first show where like you had a female lead as a spy. This was like pre-Alias from back in the day. And that was a really cool show. So props to that. Trying to think what else. I think she did an episode of I Love Lucy that she appeared in there. And I'm thinking McClintock, of course, with John Wayne. That was really, really good. And every now and then I have like a Western channel on in the background, and I don't know if it's Grid or another one, but there's one where she had a pretty significant role, and I wish I recall the title. I don't know if it was Shotgun, could have been Shotgun. I thought it was really, really good. There was one where she had a significant lead, and she was sort of torn between a couple of guys, and she played a saloon girl dancer with respect to that. So that was really, really cool. But of course, McClintock, and of course, when you get the 10 Commandments rerun every Easter, you see the whole all-star cast, and I love when we get to that, when we say it's an all-star cast, Yeah, Yul Brynner, Charlton Heston, and there's Ann Baxter, and there's Yvonne De Carlo. So yeah, everybody had like some significant parts though. But of course, I have to circle back. Yeah, Lily Munster is probably what I'm going to best know her for. And I think it was a role that maybe she didn't want to do, but I thought she was perfectly cast and did an excellent job as the character.
So this week, that guy in that show is Yvonne De Carlo.
He's that guy, he's that guy in the show, that guy in the show.
Now is the portion where we read some of our comments from our past episodes. We'll start with Cat Victory. Cat Victory states, join myself and Gerry for a fun Twilight Zone episode when we talked about the episode What You Need. This week we meet T'Pring when she was still dating humans and learn why it's very important to know if, quote, slippers is used as an adjective on the outside of a shoebox. Nicely done.
Ooh.
Hey, we also recently talked about the Twilight Zone episode Penny for Your Thoughts, and this was one of our favorites. Cat Victory once again chimed in with this. In this episode of Frenzy Phase, we follow Hector Poole as he discovers a big difference between the private thoughts and the outward behavior of his coworkers. Check out myself and Professor Frenzy each week. Nicely done.
Nice. Thank you.
We also talked about the Twilight Zone episode A Game of Pool. We heard from Our Kind of Entertainment, who chimed in with the following. I saw the 80s version of this episode, and it was a pretty darn good take too, with a different take on the ending once the game is over. Jesse, being a younger man in the episode, works a tad bit better than Jack's seemingly late 30s, early 40s looking version of Jesse. Considering a younger guy, probably in his 20s, makes more sense as someone willing to let what other people think of him drive him mad with being number one while neglecting women, dates, having fun, etc. during the best years of his life. Regardless, the acting in this classic Twilight Zone episode version is great. Yes, indeed.
Yes, it is.
Thank you for chiming in, Our Kind of Entertainment. And with that, we'll roll right into our thank yous and plugs. We'll start off with the mascot of our show, Robin at Robin031. Robin, thank you very much. And thank you for being the love of my life. I cannot do this without you. We also heard from our friend Two Sleeps at Two Sleeps Music. Two Sleeps puts on a concert twice a week. Here's how you can catch it. Go on to your computer or your device, what have you. Now, on Sunday afternoons, 3:30 Eastern, 2:30 Central, type in Two Sleeps Music Twitch TV. Two Sleeps Music Twitch TV. Click on the link. Then once you're there, sign in, get involved in an interactive chat, as well as access to a song list where you, yes, you, can request a song out of a list of well over 200 songs. You might want to hear some Foo Fighters. You might want to hear some Tom Petty. Oh, how about some Commander Cody, Stray Cats? How about some Monkees? How about some Jerry Reed? Johnny Cash. The list goes on and on and on of all these marvelous, marvelous entertainers and songs that you can hear Two Sleeps do a rendition of. Trying to think, how about James Taylor, Blue Oyster Cult? The list goes on and on and on and on. Not to be outdone, Two Sleeps does a concert on Tuesday evenings, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, with the same format. I also want to give a plug to the inexpensive Patreon that you can sign up for a mere $1. You can get some original content each and every month. And I also want to give a shout out to Kara, aka Karasaurus Rex, who does a lot of things behind the scenes to get the concert up and going. Thank you for your plugs on your show, Two Sleeps, and right back at you. We also want to give a shout out to our buddy Randy. Now, over on Twitter, he's at RandallAnders1, and over on Blue Sky, he's at Frumpy Sketch Artist. He puts out talented sketches each and every day. He's collected 3 volumes, and he's put them out on Amazon, so please check those out. Very inexpensive and a delight just to see the marvelous talent of Randy. Randy also does a podcast called Soundtrack Alley. That's where Randy looks to see how music enhances a film, along with some film's history. It's a well-produced podcast, and we highly recommend it. We also highly recommend the podcast Coffee and Comics, done by our friend Clinton. In this podcast, Clinton will examine a comic in about the time to take a cup of coffee. Occasionally, Clinton will have on a guest, ask some very fascinating questions. As time permits, Clinton also does a podcast called Fan Film Fridays. That's over on the Longbox Crusade feed. Most recently looked at a fan film of Jesse Quick, the comic book character. And he had the Irredeemable Shag on as a guest. Now, once you're over at the Longbox Crusade, you'll get a whole treasure trove of some outstanding podcasts. Oh, yeah, and check this out. Prof, your episode where you guested with Jared just recently dropped, so that please listeners check that one out, where you looked at an Indiana Jones comic, so you can hear the professor. So over on the Longbox Crusade feed, I'm so glad I remembered at this time. Yeah, so Prof, nicely done with that. When you were looking at the Indiana Jones comic with Jared, that was a fantastic show.
That was fun.
Yeah, how cool was that? So please check that out, and also great stuff there with the Sherlock's Home podcast. Tons of content over there. Please check it out. Good stuff over there. Now, Clinton also does Days of High Adventure, which looks at sword and sorcery comics as time permits, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Power Hour with John and Lane. Billy D, also, I want to give you a plug, my friend. Magazines and Monsters is the feed. You recently wrapped up the examination of the 70s Black Panther comics with your friend Ed. Ed really brought the history in that. Good stuff there. Scott, and you also looked at Tomb of Dracula. Great Gene Colan artwork. Fantastic stuff there. And most recently, you and some guests looked at The House on Haunted Hill. And Billy D, if you're listening to this, that's something we're going to cover down the road. So I hope you're not thinking we're stealing your thunder here. This just coincidentally happened to be on your script, but it was a great dissection of the fantastic film by Vincent Price, and good stuff there. And just really, really enjoyed listening to you and your guests discussing The House on Haunted Hill. Fantastic stuff, Billy D. And I can't wait for the next episode of The Brave and the Bob, where you look at comics written by Bob Haney, which may be an episode of a Batman team-up, looking from the Brave and the Bold comic book, but it could be anything that Bob Haney wrote. Maybe an issue of World's Finest. Who knows? Thank you, Billy D, for some great content. Listener Emeritus, it's our friend Mac Rocks. We also want to give a plug to D.S. May Collins. Thank you for longtime support. How about Chris Hamby? Thank you so much, my friend. The Gringo. It's our friends Darren and Ruth at the Rad Adventures Network with a whole great list of podcasts there. Bill Beer, co-host of the Bat Pod, looking at Batman comics. It's our friend Brent Michaud and Bill in Colorado. If I overlooked you, my sincerest and deepest apologies. Please let me know on the socials at BTO and Batbooks. Better still, to cover all the bases, let the professor himself know, Professor Frenzy. And listeners, we really had a lot of fun with this one, and we thank you so much for listening, and we can't thank you enough for your support.
The Professor Frenzy Show!
Professor Frenzy, it's a show. Professor Frenzy Show. Professor Frenzy, it's a show. Professor Frenzy Show.